And it's my session. Hello, you guys. I am so happy to be here. I'm one of the organizers of this conference, and I'm so glad to be able to do this and bring this to you guys, both you who are here in the room and to you guys who are live online for this event. It has been so much fun to set this up, and I gotta say, we got a full room here right now. It's a completely packed room, and you guys, you just look totally awesome to me from up here. You're the Windows Azure stars, and some of you guys hadn't done much Windows Azure, but you're here. You've realized that this is the place to be. This is important. This is where you want to be. And for my session, I'm going to talk about things more. I'm going to try to be a little bit less Windows Azure-y. I'm going to fail, but I'm going to try and talk more about the questions that I get as a consultant. So I am a consultant. My name is Magnus Martinsson, and I work for Active Solution. And if you want these nice lunch seminar things, you can get them at our booth outside. Right. You can always reach me. I'm easy to find and easy to reach if you have any questions at all. And in my work as a consultant, I go out and I meet a lot of customers, and I get some of the same questions, and I talk about some of the same concepts over and over again. And I thought I'd digest that into a session. And you know, we have 60 minutes, and clock is ticking. I've got my trusty kitchen timer clock ticking right here. And you know, we have an hour. So after an hour, we'll stop. I'm sure we're going to be able to fill at least an hour of content. So let's get going. And I also want to point out, of course, that we did the Global Windows Azure Bootcamp. And the speakers who are here today were instrumental in doing that. That was really fun. We're going to make plans to do another one. This was on April 27th of this year, and we're going to do one for next year in the spring sometime. After this conference, we're going to make some plans and see if we can make it bigger. I mean, we only had locations on Earth, right? So we can maybe expand that to, I don't know, Mars. Yeah, that'll be good. Anyway, so Global Windows Azure Bootcamp was awesome. How many participated in the audience? There was a few, yeah. So it'll be a boot camp. Mark was there. Mark loved that. You had fun with this. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Thank you for a session, by the way. You killed some of my demos. That's awesome. So we didn't sync up before. But never mind. I'll just skip over those demos that are already being covered, and we'll continue talking. So, and also I want to note that this was supposed to be public like Tuesday, but it's going to be public tomorrow. So I just did a panel together with Adrian Hall and Andy Piper, and it's going to be on InfoQ. So go to InfoQ tomorrow and read about adjusting to development in the cloud. It's probably going to be very much less Microsoft-y because I'm the only Azure guy, and these guys are typically not Azure guys in there. So it's going to be sort of a broad discussion on how to adopt to cloud development. And that's really what this session is about as well. So, guys, is it time to move to the cloud? And another question, are we there yet? Right? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? That's a good question. We are moving in that direction. And the most important thing to note is that nobody's saying otherwise. Nobody's saying that we're not going to go there. There's absolutely nobody saying that, oh, this cloud compute thing is going to go away. It's going to die out. It's not going to be a trend, or it's not going to stick. But I'm going to start this off by doing, I know this is a Swedish audience, and participation is scary to Swedish audiences, but we're going to try. If anybody could name the technology-related model that I'm thinking of based off these three names, Beal, Bowen, and Rogers. Anybody know what they did? What model they came up with? I'm going to add another person, see if I can make it more easy for you. If you know, just raise your hand or shout it out. More? Anybody know any technology-related models with more in them? Processes? Yeah. With Moore's law? Yeah. So that's not Jeffrey A. Moore. That's Gordon E. Moore. So sorry, sir. Thank you for playing. that was a trick question. I'm sorry. I fooled you. So that was Gordon E. Moore, not Jeffrey A. Moore. So I'm looking for another model. It looks like this. Anybody know what this is? This is the technology adoption life cycle. And it's been used since the diffusion process. It was first announced in '57, and then Rogers made a book called Diffusion of Innovations in '62. And this model has been used to sort of describe technology adoption ever since. Now the question is, where are we here with cloud computing? That's a good question, right? And moreover, you can see there's a gap right there. What's up with that? What's the gap? Well, that's the point where you go from all of the early adopters who have started to use the technology, and you start to move into mainstream. And that's when you get all the really, really difficult life-depending questions. You know, will this live or will this die? Will we adopt this technology as a broad community? And you get all the important questions right there. It'll be questions like, what is your name? My name is Magnus Mortensen, and I'm a Windows Azure MVP. What is your quest? I seek passage to the cloud. What is the true business value of cloud computing? What? I don't know that. Wah! Sorry. Crossing the Chasm was Moore's contribution to this, and this is from 1991. And he's talking about, are we crossing this chasm with this technology yet? Are we moving into the broad mainstream where usage just skyrockets and everybody just adopts and uses the technology? It'll be like, I don't know, ASP.NET. Everybody uses that if you're in the .NET space. So that's adopted and so forth with all types of technologies. And I thought I'd go, I'm actually going to use, I thought I'd point to the screen, but for the recording, it'd probably be better if I use the mouse. I'm going to ask all of you guys in a minute to, at the same time, raise one of your hands, right? And then I'm going to slide across the screen with my mouse pointer here. And when you think this is the point where we're at right now with cloud adopting for the cloud computing generally, not what you're doing, not what your company is doing, but what you think generally, where we're at right now with cloud adoption or adopting cloud computing, all right? We're probably going to move over here to the laggards in the end. Everybody's going to probably use this because nobody's saying otherwise. And we're probably going to wind up over there, but we're not there yet, obviously. I mean, these guys over here, like if this was cell phones, right? The only reason these guys are starting to buy cell phones is that they can't buy any analog phones anymore. So that's when these guys jump on. This almost never happens. But you know, where are we at right now? That's the question. So everybody, please participate and raise one of your hands right now. Think about a point at this point, at that point. I'm going to drop my hand at that point. So everybody just raise one hand. Everybody. Yes, it's a Swedish audience. Everybody. All right, good. So we're over here at the laggards. If you think this is where we're at with cloud computing adoption right now, drop your hand right now. I'm going to start moving to the left, and then you can drop your hand at any time where you think we are. Some people are dropping now in the early majority phase. Some people are dropping. Oops, sorry. And now we're crossing the chasm, and we're still in the early adoption phase, and we had a few. Now, interestingly, roughly here, after the chasm, this room generally feels that we're here right now. I asked the same questions to the speakers, and it seems we're here, 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 and here. And I mean, this is not an exact science. It really isn't. But it's interesting to know in terms of when is it time to heavily invest in a technology, right? So none of these guys are actually wrong. The interesting thing to note is that the American is furthest to the right. And I believe that to be true, that the US is ahead of Europe in cloud computing adoption. I've seen some indicators that that might be true. Some countries in Europe, for instance, the UK is very far along. Sweden, yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. And I think one of the reasons that Sweden isn't further along is because we're a very innovative and very good IT nation, Sweden. One of the reasons we're not further along this line is that we're so heavily invested in all the infrastructure and all the stuff we already have. So we don't see any real reason, any real motivators to change just yet. We will, but we're not heavily there yet. I think we're somewhere here. I think we're somewhere here before or just taking the leap right now-ish kind of thing. And that kind of gives you maybe a perspective on, should I invest, or should our company invest in the cloud now? Well, it depends, right? If you want to comfortably hang around for a while, you can do that. If you want to be among the first movers, there's probably still time to be among the first movers, but soon that first movers phase is going to be over, and everybody will probably be doing this. All right, I think this is an interesting thing to bring up. All right, one thing that Mark didn't show when he talked was, so I'm running a VM now. I'm going to do the thing that Mark didn't do. I'm actually going to run the latest version of the tools. And so I have a really, really small, extremely simple website here. And I made it really small because I'm going to deploy it live, and I wanted it to be really fast. So this is my website. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go, and in the latest version of the tools, you can hit publish. Well, you've been able to hit publish for a long time. But what you can do here now in the latest version of the tools is you can create yourself a new website from inside of Visual Studio. You don't ever have to go to the portal at all. You can use the command line if you like. You can go to the portal and look at your site, but you can also create it from here. So I'm just going to put one in Europe. That's where we're at. I'm not going to bother about a database. You can actually, I've done it. You can provision yourself a new database as well as inside of Visual Studio right now. And now it's going off to the cloud. Hopefully I have internet connectivity still. And it's creating myself, creating a website in my account. I'm actually creating it in our business account. Did you see that? All right. I'll remove it later. So it's created now. And then it automatically also downloads the published settings for me. Okay, so I'm logged into Visual Studio, and this is the new version of Visual Studio, and I have already authenticated myself with the Azure portal, so it's already done. I could have done this on stage, but it doesn't make much sense to do it on stage. So I can just go ahead and say, I just want to publish this guy right now to Windows Azure. I created it. I provisioned a website in Windows Azure from Visual Studio, and just said, go and publish and create, and you can just browse to that right now. So it's Magnus Cloudburst.azurewebsites.net. I think that's pretty cool. Enabling tooling like this, enabling things like this, makes it really, really, really fast to develop and just throw things out there and have fun with it. And I've realized that I've begun to sort of do code differently as a consequence of this. And that's just a quick demo to get started. And I got a demo down on a virtual machine on the Wi-Fi with the release version of Visual Studio. I think that's pretty good. Feels good. All right. So let's talk about this now. What does the cloud bring that is new? Mark touched on some of this stuff, but since this is a separate video recording as well, I might be repeating just a little bit of what he said, and try to put sort of the overall perspective on this. Usually it comes back to this. And how many people know what NIST is? The MVPs know what NIST is. One guy over there. Most people don't know what NIST is. NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. It's a US government official organization that goes around and tries to define stuff so that we'll know what stuff is, right? NSA and things like that. Right. So they come up with this list of cloud compute features or qualities that something which is supposed to, if you want to call it cloud computing, it has to have these set of things. And I'm going to go through this list. First off, I'm going to talk about resource pooling. I don't really have a good demo of that, but I have a good anecdote. And resource pooling, I just picked this picture from the internet. I don't know if it's covers all of the cloud vendors. I don't know what Flickr is doing in there. It doesn't matter. What matters is the Greenpeace reference here. This is green computing. You don't build separate data centers for every business. You have shared data centers that a lot of businesses are using. So if your company is very environmentally friendly and really care about these things, it would make sense to move to cloud computing because you will be using a resource pool of shared resources. And not only that, right? I haven't yet to see a calculation where, on-premise, our own servers, money-wise, would actually beat this. So cloud computing is a big pool of every data center is like a couple of 100,000 virtual machines. And you can just provision your virtual machines that you need at any point you need them, and then deprovision them when you're done. And the instances will go back into the pool, right? And that's what really, really matters to your company, is to be able to pay for exactly what you use. And that's kind of scary also, actually, because I've seen cases where they feel that when they get this exact bill that tells you precisely how much you've used, you get the sum at the bottom line, and you go like, oh, isn't this a bit expensive? But the thing is that it's obvious, right? You get an exact bill every month that tells you precisely what you use, as opposed to what we had before. And I'm going to get back to this topic a little bit, because these features sort of cross over to each other. The rapid elasticity was demoed by Mark just now, that you can react to usage load very rapidly. You can just go ahead and scale out to do a huge campaign with lots of servers. A great anecdote there is Volvo's. They did one with the vampire movies. They did for the Twilight. Yeah, Volvo did a Twilight campaign, and it was huge. And then just scaled out to a massive amount of servers for the campaign, and then just shut them down when they were done. And you can do things like that in the cloud. If you try to do that with your own servers, it's going to cost you so much money. So scaling, Mark actually showed you scaling. I'm going to go and show you the website that I'm using for this. I'm using a website called My Aston Martin. Yeah. And the scaling here it's set to just, I can't scale anything here. I got to go up to shared to be able to scale up to, like, say, let's do 2 instances and save. So now scaled out my Aston Martin website to 2 instances. And scaling is extremely important. This rapid elasticity that I can just decide I want more instances, fewer instances. That's a cloud feature. And that means something to your business. If you can use just enough resource at any given point in time, that means something. Now, a true cloud service, a true cloud compute service platform is a measured service. So they can measure exactly what you use, down to every bit or every byte or everything that you use, and give you an exact tally at any point in time saying that this is how much you've used. This is what we're going to charge you for. This is how much your credit card is going to burn. Now, is that something which is useful to you guys, or is it just useful to, Microsoft or Amazon Web Services? Well, this is incredibly useful to you guys. I've already sort of covered a little bit of it, so we can just skip along and see that usually something like this is what you're looking at. You foresee that your load will be something like this. You will have to buy actual servers to respond to that load, right? So at any given point in time, you might be wasting a bunch of servers that you have bought and paid for and installed, and your actual usage is down here. Then you might get a really big problem if you have too few servers at some point, right? You can't get that business. You're losing business right here. And then you buy some more service, and then all of a sudden summer happens, right? Everybody goes away on vacation, and then they don't use your service during the summer. They're at the beach. They're not using your service, unfortunately. And then they come back after holidays, and they want to use it again. And then you have another big chunk of waste right there. So using a measured service and being able to rapidly scale and do on-demand things with your services is something that will save you money. And there is, again, I've yet to see the scenario where the actual buying, purchasing, and provisioning of your own physical servers would actually financially beat this model. Okay, so it's an on-demand service, and Mark covered this as well. The on-demand bits of this means that you can squeeze a little bit harder to get more juice out if you need that, and you can just scale back if you don't want any more, and you don't have to call the IT department to set this up. And again, you pay only for what you use. And Mark gave away the auto-scaling demo. The cool thing is that the bill is actually telling you if you're not using auto-scaling. And I think it's kind of awesome that Microsoft would take time off from the bill to his busy schedule and so forth to actually tell you how much you could save. I'm not talking about that bill. I'm talking about the Windows Azure bill, of course. So maybe that's the same. All right, I'm confused now. No, seriously, if you don't provision auto-scaling for your website, at the end of the month, you will get like on your monthly bill, it'll say like, well, if you had used auto-scaling this month, here's how much you would have saved. First of all, that's a pretty ballsy move to make, right? To actually tell you how to actually instruct you how to use our service less. Why would they do that? I mean, they waste money off that, right? Well, think about it. First of all, it's a damn good service. And I'm saying damn on stage. I'm going to do it again. So it's a really good service to give to your customers, right? Your customers are now being told how to effectively use the service to use as little of it as possible and save as much money as they can. Great service to the customers. And also, what it means is that Microsoft will be able to put more customers in the same data centers, right, on the same number of virtual servers because they will be used more efficiently, which comes back to the resource pooling question, right? So you see all of this is intertwined with each other. All of these features of a cloud are intertwined. So auto-scaling, I really don't need to show that very much. I got to go up to standard here and set my auto-scaling instance count and yeah, and so forth, right? So Mark showed this. I'm going to have to remember to scale this down because again, actually this is running on my own account. I have several. So right. So there you go. Auto scale could save you up to 50% and so forth, right? Scale by metric, CPU, and so forth. Again, Mark showed this. But I think it's typical of the way, I mean, Amazon Web Services has auto-scaling as well. It's not only Microsoft. But it's typical of the usage patterns of using a cloud platform that you get these types of services, things that you couldn't have ever gotten away with this before, right? You would have had to get some scaling between 1 and 3 instances. You would have to actually own 3 servers. And most of the time, maybe you'd use one of them. But just in case a lot of people want to use our service, we got to have some extra servers in there. I've actually been in a customer meeting, literally. I'm not going to disclose which customer. But I've been down in a customer meeting with a customer, and we talked about scaling and cost savings and so forth. And he literally said that, well, for this new project that we're talking about, we could put this in the cloud. We could try out the cloud for our company and see what happens. Or we could just host it on our own service because that doesn't cost anything. I was like, really? So your IT infrastructure doesn't have a cost? It's for free? You don't pay anything for it? You don't give people a salary. You don't buy physical servers. You don't install them and maintain them. Really? For free? Because you don't think of the cost that you had before. The IT investment was just a budget post, right, on the spreadsheet that you had to pay every month. You didn't actually realize that, or he didn't, which is strange. He was a CTO. Didn't actually realize that that is sort of a cost smeared out over everything that you do in the organization, right? So think about that. Or a lot of people are not thinking about that, who actually should be. All right. We've come down to this. Now, I've shown this picture before, and I'm not going to stray too long with it, but I'm going to tell you briefly, though, that this is one of the first carriages which was able to automatically be mobile on its own. It was an automobile, right? It was automatically mobile, and people were so afraid of it that some of the designs mounted a horse's head on the front of them, just to be safe, because it's really scary if there's a carriage moving and then there's no horse, right? Some of these had whip holders on them because, if you don't have a whip holder, where are you going to put the whip, right? So it's important. And I use this picture as a backdrop to the discussion that humans, it's a human condition, we are not really keen on change. once we're comfy in a situation, we don't exactly jump on board on every change that comes along, because it's great to have everything set up and everything is organized and it's all good, right? So there are some patterns in here that are not really great. So here's one that I've come up with. It's the almost pattern. Now, the almost pattern, it's about your application, right? It's out there, your application is running somewhere. It doesn't have to be in the cloud. Your application is running and people are logging into it. They're signing in using a username and a password, right? This means that you take care of the username and password and store that in your database. And what you could do instead is that you could get rid of that and just outsource that as a service. Somebody was talking about the access control service, right? You could use the access control service in Windows Azure and sort of not use that for a login and enable everybody else to log in using a Google account or a Microsoft account or something like that, right? This one right here is your own Active Directory back home using Active Directory Federation Services 2.0. That's a mouthful. As identity providers, right? You use those to log in, okay? And instead of using username and password, you allow people to choose an account they already have. And a lot of my customers go, oh, that's awesome. Let's do that. Let's enable people. Let's enable everybody on Facebook to log into our service. Awesome. They just see dollar signs. And then they go like, yeah, but we also want to keep the username and password login. Like, the whole point was to get away with authentication. You don't want authentication inside of your application. Now, I've phrased this differently from time to time. Sometimes I've talked about it saying that, your application doesn't really care who the user is. They might care if the user is actually paying money. In that sense, they would care. But they don't care like a user is a user. I don't care which user. What they care about is that the second time the user comes back, it's the same user, right? And they can make sure that it's the same user. They care about authenticated users. Your application doesn't care about authentication. If they can get authenticated users just handed to them, they would want to get rid of this thing. If they could, just get rid of it and not have that in our code. Why don't we want to have the username password in our own application? Somebody. Security reasons. Correct, sir. Security reasons. If you don't store secrets about people, nobody want to break into your service and steal stuff, right? You don't want to have their username and password because you know that they won't have that won't be a unique username and password right there. It'll be the same one they have for Google or something else, right? So if somebody breaks into your app and steals your users' usernames and passwords, they can probably go and log into a bunch of other services with the same usernames and passwords. So if you can get rid of that, that's awesome. And if you want to go all the way, you can do something like this. You can set up your own login service, your own security token service, where you can have the username and password if you so wish, but it's separate from your application. And the point is that your application trusts only one thing, authenticated users coming at them from the access control service. That's what they trust. So the almost pattern is just that. Now, when I say that you should embrace technology and change and go to the cloud and do all sorts of awesome things, I'm not talking about must-buy Apple product. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the fandom that you must actually adopt everything and get the latest of everything. That's not my point. My point is that you should consider doing it right. If it's worth doing, it's probably worth doing it right. And that's when you'll get the biggest benefits from it. Not by chickening out at the last moment and saying, oh, we'll just throw in username and password for good measure. Because that's good. That's comfy for our users. They're used to signing up to our services using a username and password. So let's stick to that. Let's not change anything. Right? That's a warning sign. So let's go to our website. So I have enabled this My Aston Martin website, which you can all just browse. Online, guys, browse to this site right now. And you guys in the audience, go ahead and browse to it. So here it is. This is me and my Aston Martin website. And it's live online now, and you'll be able to log in soon. So go ahead and go to My Aston Martin AzureWebsites.net and zoom in there, myastonmartin.net. azurewebsites.net. And there's no way to log into this site right now because I haven't enabled it. I want to show you another feature of Windows Azure Websites where I can actually configure my website, scroll down to the settings, and make it editable. So I can change app settings from inside of the portal. These app settings will then override whatever I have in my web config. I can also change connection strings and stuff in here, which means that you can have live database connection strings and live database settings and live other settings in the portal, and that will override what you have in your development environment. So all your devs can just have the development connection strings and all of that stuff in the web config and just use that, hit F5 from Visual Studio and work and so forth. When they check in the code and when they push it out to this live service, what will happen is that these settings will override, which is great because then they don't have to actually remember to switch the connection strings before they publish, which, you know, that has happened once or twice. So I'm saving this now. I actually have one of these exclamation points as well. And if I go and refresh, you can all just go and edit the car owner right now, which will take you to a nice login. I'm going to go with Google. And I'm already logged in, so I'll just go Magnus Google and save. So now this Aston belongs to Magnus from Google. All right, I just logged in and I authenticated. So you saw that what I was doing there when I authenticated, I was redirected away from my application. I chose Google as authentication, and then I came back, right? So the question is somebody else using this? Yep, I figured. I knew, Martin, you would do this. I knew you would, Martin. So Martin is in there, and then when I refresh, it's no longer my Aston, so I'm going to have to go back and make me the driver again. Just go back and reclaim the car. And, really? You're going to do this? We're going to do this all day? You know what we really need? We really need a leaderboard. That's what we really need. And so, fortunately, I'm going to go and log in with a new browser here, and I'm going to choose Windows Live ID instead. So what we really need is to log in Magnus Sweden. I'm going to set that. And we got to show the leaderboard here. So what do we have here? Martin, have you logged in 89 times in this thing already? What are you doing? Crazy person. So we have, oh, drop table? Fuck you. Sorry. All right, you asshole. All right, I'm gonna hit you back. So I'm gonna cheat. And I'm gonna go leaderboard again. Actually, what I did was that yeah, there we go. Magnus from Sweden, 210 right there. So I built in some cheats because I wanted to win. So, right. Guys, I spent way too much time on this demo, prepping this demo. I just gotta say, you've already noticed. And what I did was one more fun thing though. I want to show you. See, I want to show you here that I used the cache that Mark talked about. I have I wrote a little cache manager class here, and it's just a little cache that can get and put stuff in Windows Azure, and it has some config to it. So all I really needed to do was activate this cache and just set some settings here in the data cache client. All I really needed to do was add a NuGet reference to the cache, installed packages, and hopefully I've removed most of the other stuff in there. Yeah, so I'll just add a reference to Windows Azure caching, and I can just go ahead and start using the cache. So even when I'm running from my local machine, when I'm doing development, I can use a cache service which is in Azure. And then when I publish to Azure, I'll just use the cache in Azure. So the data you've seen here on this site is data in the cache. I can actually go and cheat, and then I can actually kick all of you guys out, but that's because I couldn't stop myself. All right, so showing off for some things in Azure, and there's a point to all this. There's a point to using all of these services instead of you building and maintaining these things yourselves. So that's one of the biggest benefits of actually using a platform in the cloud. But again, what's the #1 reason to go cloudy? It's technology. It's technology geeky, right? Or as we also like to call it, version 2 is greater than version 1, right? So you got to go there because it's technology geeky. But if you use that as your only single motivator, I've seen this happen, you actually probably won't get the benefits that you're looking for. That will fail. But what you need to do, and here's a sort of a task for you guys, if you want to do cloudy stuff, who are you going to have to talk to? This guy. The CEO. This is a recent study. CEOs, generally speaking, report that cloud services will take a top priority moving forward. It will be very important. Now, Andy Cross is actually not in the house. Wonder where he is. He likes this next one. And also Scott, doing the SQL talk, likes this next one. Information is one of the top priorities moving forward for our applications. The company that can crunch more data faster is going to win, right? So you can do that using cloud compute resources and compute big data and do big data analysis. And some people coined the data as the new oil expression. That's one of the most important things going forward. And information should be important to your CEO. That's one of the reasons, one of the motivators that will get him going, get him interested. Mobility is the obvious one. Laptops, smartphones, tablets, call them what you like, the Internet of Things. Like you can connect anything to the internet and just communicate with anything. We have a connectivity service bus talk in this conference, right, Sam? Yep. So stick around, guys, and you'll see that talk. Connectivity and mobility is extremely important. And the numbers of devices connected online are just exponentially growing right now. So that's one of the most important ones. And then the game changer, right? The backplate, the thing that makes all of this work. It's the cloud. If you pick top 3, the cloud is in there, making a competitive advantage for more easily attainable to organizations regardless of size. Now, I know we have some people from India in the room. Yay! India is doing very well on the cloud market and adopting the cloud really rapidly. I think more so than we're doing in Europe right now. And that sort of should also be sort of an indicator to us. We have all this infrastructure. We have all the server centers. Each company owns a lot of servers, and they have all this compute power, and we don't really need to move to the cloud. Well, guess what? Other companies, not only in India, not only in the east of Europe, but everywhere, startups are starting up right now. Do you think a startup today would go out to the town and say like, okay, cool, so we have some venture capital here, we raised some money, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go out to town and buy some servers and stick them in a closet and configure them and stuff. No. Startups today will never buy servers, ever. And what does that mean to all the companies that already exist? Does it mean that we can comfortably stay where we are, or we should consider evaluating what changing would mean to us, right? So that's an important CEO question. And in the end, cloud computing, it is inevitable, and it's really awesome, and that is Scott Guthrie. It really is Scott Guthrie.
No red t-shirt, sorry.
No red t-shirt, yeah, I'm sorry, they dressed him up, and so that's why we can't recognize him. So, right, that is actually Scott Guthrie. So, modern app. I had some tags in my session description, and I said, modern app. How does this relate to the modern app? And I'd like to start with the question, modern app? I'm careful with using terms like this, because what is a modern app? Is that something that, down the line will be called a not-so-modern app anymore? And then all of a sudden it will be just a plain old app? And then further down that line, it's going to be like, who uses the term app anymore, Grandpa? Right? So I'm careful about using things like modern in these modern or new, right? It's the new service, the modern service. And it's like, really? Today, but not tomorrow. But we all want to be hipsters, right? We all want to be really cool and really awesome. And isn't it great that we just came up with a new term, hipsters, so that we can do something really new and fresh and that we never have done before? This is the 1940s hipsters, and these are modern hipsters of today. Is it urgent to move to the cloud? That's a good question. What do you think? Do you think that cloud adoption is something you should prioritize? Can we get a show of hands? People are slowly raising their hands. It's like a bunch of lemmings in the room. Some people are raising their hands, and then other people are starting to raise their hands as well. No, I agree. No, it is important. It's very important. And what is a modern app in this space? What does the cloud have to do with modern apps? Well, in my mind, the modern app uses a backend as a service. Now, Mark alluded to this as well. The backend as a service is your data being moved to the cloud in the background, right? Your data is shipped off to the cloud and stored somewhere and then shared. So you can play games against each other. You can, well, actually, I think I have a game right there. Skulls of the Shogun is an example of this. I love this game. And it's available on on your Windows RT device, on your Windows phone, and so forth. I don't know exactly how many clients they have. But what happens is that you have an account and the data of your games is stored in the cloud in the background. It's just one example. Of course, things like Halo is one of the more brilliant examples that have been around for a long time. And they're not, I mean, Halo existed before the cloud computing concept as such existed. But it's one of those services that actually does this. They store data in the cloud in the backend, and that's the modern app for you right there. Your consumers, your users, will expect to be able to log into your app using different types of devices, right? Using the web browser, for instance, and sharing data and stuff behind the scenes. And the way to do that is to use a backend as a service. Somehow, somewhere, servers are running, probably in the cloud, right? And your applications connect to that data. That's how it relates. So all of you guys who are building client application, who want to build the next cool, mobile phone game, who want to build like the next Angry Birds or something, and hope to make it big, you're going to be using the backend as a service, and that's going to be in the cloud. That's how it relates. And Mark showed this. So that's the point. And I showed you usage of the access control service, where I just completely, I didn't have a login page on my application, right? I also showed you how to use a cache just to remove data storage concerns and caching concerns from my application, which enables me as a developer to focus on doing exactly my business and nothing else. I don't have to set up a service bus. I could certainly do that. I could certainly spend time to, well, build a service bus, or forget about that. Just get a service bus and provision it and set it up and maintain it. It's doable, but it takes away from the time that you spent on building your application and winning over market share and adding features to your game or whatever it is, right? So you really should consider using service application building blocks. It doesn't have to be from Microsoft, but they could be from Microsoft, right? And just use services instead of building services. Because that's your core business is not building these services. It might be, but usually it isn't. And I'd like to show you transient fault handling, actually. Now, this is an important point to make here, so I'm actually going to show you some real code from a toy project that I'm working on right now. It's called a booking viewer, and what it really does is that it pulls out some data from Exchange and turns that into blobs and blob storage. So my code here, this is just toy, so that's why I have some stuff called dummy in here. Connects to Exchange, gets some data, and serializes it into an XML stream, which is then stored. All right, I'm using, this is the latest, this is the preview of the next version of this. Is the Storage SDK 2.1, where I can use the await keyword, and I can do upload from stream async. So I can just await the upload to be done and write simple code like this. But the point that I really wanted to make with this was the blob request options. So the blob request options contains a retry policy. And I just set it up to exponentially retry every 2 seconds 3 times. Now, the storage service will most likely be there, and it'll most likely answer, and it has an SLA, and it'll be up, almost always. But what if it isn't? What if something happens? What if connectivity, networking, something just has a hiccup when I make one of these requests and my code fails? Did I write try-catch stuff for that? Did I write code to actually retry and do it again? Or what happens? Will my service just show the yellow screen of death? Or will it recover and say, oh, I couldn't get that data right now. I'll have to come back to you in a minute or retry again. It's extremely important that we build this into our applications. And I've seen so many examples where this hasn't been done, and you just get a generic error when something like this occurs. And it's unacceptable. And that's called transient fault handling. And any time you access a service, which is a remote service, like storage in this case, or a cache, or anything else which is not something that you have inside of your own code or inside of your own application, that other service could fail. And you really need to take that into consideration. And the way of doing that is to do transient fault handling. The storage SDK has that built in, but if you want to do it generally, there is an application block from Microsoft Patterns and Practices called the Transient Fault Handling Application Block. How many people have used that? Well, not enough, but some have. And it's quite good. And what you absolutely must do is take into account what happens to my service when some other service that I depend on isn't answering the way it should. You need to make sure that your application recovers from that and just continues. Your service cannot go down because some other service might not respond. Okay? That is something that you have to bring home with you from this exercise today. And then look at your code. Look at the stuff that you have in your applications today. Are you doing this? Are you actually taking care of these problems? Very important. Okay, cool. So now we have something that I want to show you within Magic Quadrant for Cloud Infrastructure as a Service. Now, there's a couple of things to point out here. And it's Amazon Web Services is in the lead up there in the corner. One of the leaders of this IaaS market. Now we're talking virtual machines and infrastructure as a service only. And Microsoft is way down there in the innovators. Now, the biggest reason Microsoft is way down there in the innovators and not up in the leaders is actually because of the scale on this, is the ability to execute. I'm not saying that Microsoft doesn't have the ability to execute on the infrastructure as a service side, but what they don't have is the documented history of doing this. Because the IaaS service from Microsoft in the Windows Azure platform came online in June, was published in, so it hasn't been around for so long. So Gartner, who is doing this study, they can't give Microsoft a higher score on ability to execute yet, because we don't know. We don't have the history of being able to execute. But what is important is that Microsoft is way over here. On the innovators scale, they have the completeness of vision going forward, right? And you will probably, most likely then, see Microsoft trying to play catch up with Amazon Web Services. And some of you guys may have noticed that I used my pointy device here with the laser pointer. You can't see that online, but I used the pointer thingy. And I gotta say, don't ever do that, because laser pointers are good for just one thing. Messing with your cat is what laser pointers are good for, and sorry, but I purposefully showed you using the pointer. Guys, do you have any opinions on this? It's kind of difficult to have anything really great to say about this, but I wanted to show you this. I wanted to show you that Gartner thinks that Microsoft is very, very innovative in the cloud, in the IaaS space. And that's something to take to heart and think about. Of course, Amazon Web Services was there first, and they're way out in the lead if you talk about how much usage they have and so forth. By the way, probably Microsoft are crying themselves all the way to the bank, because Amazon Web Services runs a ton of Windows servers, and all of that license money goes back to guess who, right? So, so it's probably still quite good that a lot of people are using that service as well. All right, so Mark told you there are three main ways to deploy your applications to the cloud. The virtual machines is the stuff we just talked about. I showed you some websites, and we've had questions on the cloud services. These are the three main ways in which, or the three ways in which you can run your applications in the cloud. The hybrid scenario is also going to be extremely important. The hybrid scenario is, of course, the fact very applicable to a Swedish audience that you won't be moving all of your stuff. I actually had a conversation with a customer, and they were like, we're moving all of our stuff to Azure. We're moving all of our machines, running virtual machines and so forth, and you had a problem with just one of them, which didn't exactly fit into running in Azure. And while I think that's great to sort of embrace, we're not going to own any servers, we're going to move away from doing that, you are probably not going to reach that anytime soon, and you shouldn't go there just to go there. You should go there if it makes sense. Some things does not make sense to run in the cloud, and then there's, of course, discussions about data security and data privacy and so forth, depending on what your business is. That's a whole other topic. It's huge. But the hybrid scenario is extremely interesting. Even if your service contains sensitive data information about Swedish citizens, and you can't move that service off into the cloud because of the laws we have, well, probably you can move parts of it onto the cloud, right? So that your service, so that public parts of your service can be on the cloud and have availability and have scalability when the disaster strikes. In Sweden recently, there was a huge outage on some airports, and we had problems in the airports, and planes were grounded, and people were standing around trying to figure out when the next flight might take off and what's the latest information and so forth. Well, the problem was that the information system broke down as well, right? So people were not only stranded, they were without information. And the public information about which flights are leaving and when, and the status updates on the service that is going on and so forth, that is not data sensitive. That's the information they needed at that point. They didn't have it, but they needed it, right? And these are typical hybrid scenarios. They could have had a service in a public cloud where this thing would have been running, and people were trying to access it with their mobile phones and so forth to figure out when the flights were going to leave. So the hybrid scenarios, even if you can't move everything, could you move something, and would that make sense to you, right? And I promised I'd show getting started. We're getting low on time, but I have time to do it. So the dev test thing. What you want to do is you want to be able to just shoot things out there and have them in a testing environment. Now, I showed you that I did this from Visual Studio. I created a website and I threw it out there, and it's running in Windows Azure right now, and it's actually running there for free. Not only is it running in my already paid for MSDN through the partnership and so forth, paid for subscription, but the actual website is running for free. And I can just go ahead and do that all day. Just throw things out there and just play around. And I have to go and clean up ever so often because I'm doing this too much almost. And what it means to your organization as a whole is that you will start thinking about development differently. And it'll sort of, I don't want to be that guy that says it'll set you free or anything like that. I'm not going to burst into song or anything. But it does make you think differently about development, because you can just not be bothered with trying to set up the testing environment and so forth. It's just there. You can just use it. When you go home at night, you can just shut it off, and it's not going to cost you anything. And you can just come back in the morning and start it up again. And if you really like open source, Mark didn't mention, the SDKs are on GitHub. All of the SDKs for Windows Azure are on GitHub. So you can do things like go in there and fork the Ruby repo if you want to, and make a change and submit a pull request. I'm not sure it's ever going to make itself in there, but they have received pull requests on these things. So if you like open source, you should go there and check it out. I know Alan has downloaded the code and played around with it just to see how Microsoft coded their stuff in there. Because in the back end, I mean, if we're talking about things like, in Alan's case, it was storage, and his session is going to be on storage. He wanted to know how they wrote the SDK for storage. And in the background, storage will communicate with a REST API, because the storage service has a RESTful API. So it will make an HTTP request with a RESTful request and so forth, and with headers and stuff in there. But you don't have to, of course, do that from your code. That would be cumbersome for everybody. So they wrote these SDKs that you can just pick up and use and just write .NET code the way you're used to. But I mean, if you wanna, you can just go and look at it. And then there's the Aston Martin. All right, first of all, bring up your cell phone and zap this thing. And if you're online, zap the QR code or type bit.ly whack Windows Azure Aston Martin and activate your Windows Azure benefits. And that is actually for real on the site. I'm not kidding. If you go to that link, you will see my face there. And so that car literally already belongs to me. I don't even know why I bother showing you this, because I'm going to win the car. It's a lottery. Okay. We have a few minutes more. There are a couple of more concepts that I'd quickly like to point out. Multi-tenancy is like the holy grail of the cloud. It really is. Let's say that you have a product today that you box and ship to your customers. They take your product and install it. Then you need to upgrade them, right? You need to roll out an upgrade. Or then they need service. Or then something breaks. And then, right? So your service organization grows as your customer base grows. And that just doesn't scale. At some point, you're going to be doing nothing but service. And what will happen is that your developers who should be developing the next set of features will actually have to respond to service requests. And your productivity, your moving forward, will slow down. So moving to the cloud will then probably could mean, it doesn't have to be that, but it could mean that instead of installing one service on everybody's system, on all of your customer system, you just deploy once to the cloud and have all of your customers use your service, and then you truly become a service company, right? So then it's as a service all of a sudden, right? Your service as a service. That's the most important part. I don't think we'll have time to go through this, but we've sort of touched on some of this. What you want to have is a service-oriented approach to things. Use services and be able to just swap services, right? That's semantic interoperability right there. You just call to a service. You don't care what service, where it is, how it functions, just so long as it comes back with the correct, appropriate response to your application. And then you could just swap those services out. Good example of this is using the service bus. The service bus is something that your application would connect to, and then that service bus would talk to some other service somewhere. What you can easily do then is just swap that other service. Swap it from one place to another. What if it's on premise in the beginning, and then you move it to the cloud, and you just change an address in the service bus outside of your application? It doesn't have anything to do with your application. Your application doesn't know the difference. The access control service is another example of this. Your application receives authenticated users because they trust the authentication model of Google or Facebook or somebody else, right? Microsoft account. You're completely just removed from all of those bothersome problems of where is that service, how does it work, and what if it doesn't work? It just doesn't matter to you. In continuous delivery, I actually deployed right now, right in this room, an update to the cloud website, the website for this conference, the Cloudburst website. I made a mistake on the site and I updated it, and I just checked in my code. In this case, I was checking in my code because I was using, so you need to automate, right? I was using the Team Foundation service. And before I turn off, I'm just going to have to show you this, because if you haven't gotten yet your name, let's see if I'm signing in here. Yeah, there you go. I have magnus.visualstudio.com. I have my own Team Foundation service name in there. You could use your company name, you could use your own name, and just get as a service, and up to 5 users are actually completely for free. So if you're a startup and have less than 5 developers, you can just go and use and get a build service and a deployment service and everything just included out of the box, just for free, just for fun. And that's sort of, I think, one of the most important points that I could ever make in a presentation like this. It should be fun. 5 users for free, right? So I'm about done, and I'm about out of time. So I want to thank you guys for being with me today and listening to what I had to say. And everything will be cloudy, at least from my perspective, in the future. And that's it for me. If you have any questions, catch me out by the Active Solution booth or any time here during these 2 days. Thank you guys for listening.